thank you to Stuart from SHH and Pritesh from Ethos Construction, who have honoured us with their time and their knowledge today. I can't tell you how honoured we are and how important it is that these events going forward, I'll explain what that's about, these events going forward require these guys, and they're giving up their time free to educate us all in the ways of elements of construction we're all learning here. It was over a quick conversation with Stuart about 2 months ago over lunch, where he categorically bent my ear in a good way. And I was definitely interested, hence why we now have this today. And I heard about HRB and I heard about building regs, and it was just like fascinating. So hopefully today we're going to be a bit more enlightened and so on. So thank you, these guys, and thank you all of you who have committed to coming today. Hopefully we can teach you something. ABLearns was a dream of mine before we knew the name, about 2.5 years ago when ABC was set up. These are designed, keep an eye out for them going forward. They're designed to educate the market. They educate me, hopefully they can educate you. We can all learn something from it. If any of you guys out there have got topics or subject matters that you think are valuable and can help the market, there is a bit of networking here today, but it's really about helping the market learn something of value. And you know, I'm amazed at how many people are now walking into this, walking into HRB without no knowledge, and these are serious projects that are going ahead. We were talking about earlier with some of the contractors here. They're going ahead and people know nothing about it. Bit scary. So hopefully we're going to shine a light on it today. But ABLearns is designed to educate, help the market. Feel free to get involved. We're here for you, to give it back to you, to help you. Anybody got a topic, anybody want to think there's something of value we need to be aware of, we want to sort of go forward with it, that's what ABLearns is here for, and we hope to get more and more of a movement with it. This is only our second one going forward. I just want to pass you over to James, who is the host with the most. He's absolutely going to take care of it. My work is done. And give them a big round of applause, the guys here, and make them welcome.
Do you want to grab that quick?
Thanks, Andy. That's great introduction. So I'm delighted to have, I'm going to read out just so I can get it right. Pritesh Ladd, owner, Ethos Construction and St James's Interiors, which is a niche main contractor specialising in prime residential and high-end residential-led mixed-use projects. They work for property developers, private individual architects and investors on projects in and around London and the home counties. He's also an expert on HRB. And Stuart McLauchlan, Director of Architecture at SHH, London-based award-winning international practice founded in 1991, known for creating luxury residential and hospitality projects for high-net-worth clients and notable institutions. The firm specialises in architecture, interior design and branding, offering bespoke services with a flexible, adaptable approach to meet diverse project needs across a global clientele. So thank you for joining me today. We have a few questions, and I thought what would be nice to keep it really interactive. If you do have a question, and we're going to just kind of freestyle it, I guess, between ourselves. If you do have a question and you think it's pertinent at the time, just pop your hand up. It would be nice to kind of get a discussion going. This is just important for us that you feel that you're part of it. Sometimes it's good to wait till the end, but I like it when we kind of do it as we go, because I think then it's relevant. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to start us off with this. In recent years, the UK construction and property sector has undergone one of the most significant regulatory shifts in decades. The Building Safety Act and related legislation have redefined responsibilities, accountability and compliance, particularly in relation to high-risk buildings. Today's discussion is about unpacking what this really means in practice, the challenges, the opportunities and the cultural shift needed across the industry. So, to the panel, how would you describe a HRB, a high-risk building?
How would you describe? Well, this is where there's an issue. There's too wide a net on what an HRB building is. Everyone expects straight away that it's a multi-story, large residential building or commercial building. it's not only that, it affects small apartments, it affects anything. If it's in an HRB building, a building above 18 meters, it falls into that category. So if we're doing a couple where we're doing a single story apartment, but it sits in an HRB building, which means we have to do the full submission for that small apartment, even if the changes are really quite minor. And I think people don't realize that is one of the big stumbling blocks, is that people get involved in a project. The client might buy a building or buy an apartment thinking they can do a quick new kitchen, tosh and bosh, and get in 6 months. That is not the case. They have to jump all the hoops, the same hoops as you have to jump to do a multi-story, brand new resi construction. And that's a fundamental issue with HRB and the understanding of it.
So it's also like, from a technical point of view, it's like 17, is it 17 or 18 meters?
18 meters, yeah.
And was it 6 stories or? Seven stories, so like, that's, but then we're on a project at the moment where, only 10 years ago where we did a commercial block, it was 7 stories, and, now we're putting planning in for the second and third to be residential, but we've done the work 10 years ago, but now the whole building, like exactly what you're saying, has to be reclad, redone to meet HRB regulations. This is a 10-year-old building, which is crazy. Yeah.
So we were talking earlier on, Stuart, before we started. What are the cost implications for a submission for HRB?
I think that's one of the things that people don't realize is when you make that submission to HRB, it's no longer just a simple building control or like a building regulation submission. The HRB charge an hourly rate. So when you make your submission, you've got to make sure that submission is really, really tight, because the more complicated and unclear the submission is, the more they will charge. The HRB will charge you, and for an apartment or for a small project, it could be anything up to £25,000 in fees for the HRB to review your package. And if there's any mistakes and it gets resubmitted, that cost just keeps climbing and climbing and climbing. So you've got to make sure that your submission is as robust, concise and clear as possible to reduce the client's expenditure on the HRB fees. There's no avoiding it. You have to pay it, but as I said, the more unclear it is, the more the client's going to pay.
From a timeline point of view, you're adding a considerable. You could be adding 6 months, 12 months to a project. So in terms of looking at interest costs, extra prelims, there's much more uncertainty, which adds extra cost to a project as well. So it's all
I think it's the main timeline of the project that extends. Sure. Sorry.
Is it working?
Hello?
Yeah. Let's put it in here. You can hear me.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
So just it's the extra timeline. Also, like in terms of building the details, having to ensure all of the details are designed before you even get on site is adding cost to a project as well. So it takes away the cost uncertainty at the end, but it adds a lot of cost up front.
Do you think people miss it a lot in kind of the REBA stage? They get far down the line and then they've kind of got to go back.
Well, this is it. I think it's a fundamental shift in the way we do projects, and I think it's almost returning to an old traditional method of doing all the design up front and having everything designed, specified, detailed, and then going to site. Whereas, over the years, and that's how it started off years ago, that's how we did it traditionally. And it's got more and more accelerated, so you tend to now start on site before you've even started any of the interior design. You're just like, well, that's roughly the building, get cracking with the piles, and you start building the building while you're trying to design it. That has had to shift entirely back to where we were before. And the likes of the contractor now has to come on board as part of the professional team and is on board from day one. And you have to assemble the full professional team right in the beginning and do the fully coordinated design up front. So you're front loading all of your fees. The clients are going to have to be made aware that the fee structure has to shift. You're no longer charging, the fees used to do sort of a point in the middle and down. The point has moved right up to the beginning now, where you're doing all of your coordinated design, including all your interiors, all detailed and coordinated, preferably through BIM, so it can be interrogated properly as well, by the end of stage 4, which is when you would traditionally go out to tender, I think the tender process is going to change entirely, because you can't tender a job, the contractor can't tender the job because he's going to have been on board since the beginning already, and he has to be committed as part of the team from the beginning, rather than only getting involved at the end of stage 4 and doing the tender process that way. It's entirely different now. But it gives the client cost certainty before they hit site, because we have to have designed everything and coordinated everything up front, as I said, which is more of a sort of traditional way of doing construction.
So how do you go about, you've got a project, how would you go about finding support to sort of go through the process? Are there people out there, or you try and do it yourself, find government websites? Are there kind of like, not brokers, but people that can support?
I mean, what we're finding is, from a contractor's point of view, is our supply chain. For example, plasterers, cladding contractors, they're all aware of the situation. So, they're working with design teams, working with us as a contractor, trying to get involved in terms of mitigating those design issues that you as an architect need to work out. So it's about collaboration, really. I think working together is how we work through the situation.
Yeah. I think it's a fundamental mind shift in that it's this whole thing. It's not going away. It can't be seen as a hurdle. It needs to become part of the design ethos and the way we all work. It has to be. We have to incorporate it into what we do, and we have to just change the way we think about it, and make it a positive thing that we have to take forward. Because it is long term, it is going to be beneficial to the whole industry, because it's going to make everything safe. It's going to make everything open. It's going to make everything transparent for everyone to be aware of. Because you can't cut corners. There's no corners to cut. You have to do all these steps, and you have to do them properly. So it will be beneficial long term, but we've just got to learn how to deal with it.
It's going to take time.
Yeah.
What cultural shifts are needed in the industry to make compliance more than a tick box exercise?
I think, again, it boils down to collaboration. I think people, like getting the contractor on board early doors is a great thing. For the contractors, having our site team, the site managers, even the subcontractors and even supply chain, just more involved in that conversation, just ensures that whole process from start to finish is as seamless as possible. But it's definitely going to take time. It's all fresh, it's all new. I think everyone in this room right now, I think it's what is HRB, how does it apply to our buildings, how is it going to impact us on cost, time. I think just having the conversations and having that, over time, that hopefully those uncertainties will sort of unravel and people will find the solutions by working together.
I think as an industry, a lot more of us are aware of what's going on. As you say, from the plasterers and the tilers all the way through to the project managers and everyone involved. I think what's dangerous is how many of the private companies that are perhaps the principal accountable people or companies who aren't aware. We're involved in a project which it's only a ground floor apartment, but it's in an HRB. Now the company that runs that building weren't even aware that their building is an HRB. We had to tell them that we thought the building was, we were like, I'm pretty sure this building is going to be HRB. And they were like, what does that even mean? They weren't aware. And then they're the ones who are supposed to be aware and to be registering the building with the BSR as an HRB building. They weren't even aware that process had to happen, or that they were the ones responsible to do it. And that's an issue. That's a broader education. And I don't know how the government deals with that, because if there's companies that aren't even aware that they're supposed to do this, I don't know how that education gets spread. We're all involved in the industry because we see it every day. But there's companies who aren't involved. I don't know how they get educated by that.
That's interesting. One thing you mentioned to me earlier on was around AI and how that can support with submissions. I think one of the key things is actually submitting the right paperwork. We talked about potentially people supporting with that. You mentioned about AI. Could you share a little bit more about how AI is helping with the submissions?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's helping just yet, but it will. I think from our perspective, one of the important things to do is we design everything in BIM. So we do full BIM design with all of our things. So we can, when we do generate the design of a building, we do full 3D coordinated with all of the services. Every aspect of the building is designed into the BIM model. if you do that, you're providing an object that is can be interrogated by AI software. If it's done piecemeal in sort of 2D form through various different formats, the AI has got nothing to interrogate. But I think in time, if everyone is designing that and you have a central collaborated model that has all of the different consultants input into it, then the AI software will be able to interrogate that and be able to pick up any holes or flaws in your design before it gets submitted to HRB for approval. And I think that's something we've got to look at. I know there's companies that are starting to look at that and starting to see how they can interrogate the package, but it's down to us as the professional team to make sure that package is as concise and as detailed as possible before we run it through that AI mill. And I think that will come in time, and I think that probably needs to happen on both sides. I think it needs to happen on our side before the submission gets made, and I think it would be helpful for the BSR to have the same sort of system on their side, so when the package comes in, they can quickly run through an AI mill and go, right, these ones, this is definitely going to, it's only got 50% of the information it needs, send it straight back, get on with it. Anything that comes up that's over a certain percentage, then a human can take over and go, right, this one does look like it's got everything it needs, and then it can go to the next stage. I think that's where AI will be beneficial, but I can't say how soon that's going to happen. I know there's companies, as I said, looking into our side of it before the submission gets made. I don't know whether the BSR will be interested in taking their side, but it's interesting.
See what happens. Any thoughts?
I think the only issue with that is the cost. Like clients, it's an extra cost burden on the client having the BIM model, and it's adding another layer of compliance, which is just making projects. At this moment in time, with external factors like cost increases across the board, it's just making projects that much harder. So it's finding the right balance, I think. But you need to start somewhere. Yeah, sorry.
Does it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Does it make it more? If you're doing a full BIM model, I mean, from our perspective, we've always modeled everything in 3D anyway, because we want to be sure that it works physically as an object before it goes to site. So to add that extra layer of BIM and making sure everything's tagged correctly and it's all done, and that everyone else can plug into, you have this sort of central Revisto type model. It's a bit of extra cost for the contractor / client, because you guys would normally host that model, but the client would pay, and they will pay for that license for that project. But it's not a huge expense, and it does mean you have so much certainty on the design before you get to site. You're not running ducks in and going, oh, there's a beam in the way. Or, I mean, I'm being pretty simplistic, but it means that all those problems are solved in a digital form long before it becomes a site issue. When you've got the cost of having to pull things out and delaying site, it's all addressed up front before you get to that point, which to me just means it's beneficial.
I mean, we would love that on every single project, but having the clients to commit to that expense, that cost, because as a contractor, we would have somebody running that side of things. It just adds another layer of cost. Even 5% on a £5 million project is, sometimes clients are that sensitive to price now. So that's ideally, I mean, this whole HRB for us as a contractor, the way we like to operate is great for us, because when you're starting a project, you're having 80%, 85% of the project procured, designed, or even more. And for us, that's great, because we know what we're doing. We have cost certainty. We can, with our supply chain, we can sort of have them on board early doors. You're not having to design whilst you build. Yeah, exactly. So it's a great thing, but it's just getting the client on board from day one is.
Are you aware of any projects that this has been a barrier, and developer or whatever said, what, I don't want to go down that road at the moment? Do you think it's having an actual real negative impact, or people are just like, it's something I've got to, it's a hurdle and I'll figure it out?
We're on a project at the moment where, again, it was one I mentioned earlier, where we did the project 10 years ago. The client came back to us about 6 months ago and said to us, I'm looking to convert this into the second and third floor into residential. And the architects put it in for planning, it's got permission for 10 units, and they've not even submitted it for gateway. So going back to what you said earlier, no one really knows what's going on. Like the architect, he's got the permission for the building, but he didn't even realize that he needed to go HRB and apply for gateway 2. So,
Can I just...
Yeah.
Just in terms of the BIM, I think we might be in a bit more of a lucky position where most of our clients are wide-eyed and single wealthy clients. We don't really ask them if they want to do BIM or not. We just tell them that's the way it's done, and that becomes part of the fee structure, and we just say that's how the project needs to be procured. It'll give you the best, most certain outcome in the project. So we don't really give them the option or ask them if they can afford it.
Yeah, I guess then it just depends on what sphere you're in. So if it's ultra high net worth, maybe international, maybe it's slightly different, price sensitive, maybe more commercial, or I get and regionally as well. So that's interesting. Okay.
From talking about the cost perspective, so that project I was mentioning where it had an impact is now the client where they initially thought they've just got to build out the 10 units internally, just do a few retrofits internally, but now they have to think about recladding the whole building, and so that has had an impact on their decision of whether they do.
Yeah. Because that's a significant cost, right?
So that's
recladding the whole building.
Yeah.
Okay. What role does the accountable person play in practice, and what pitfalls should organisations be wary of? I think it's always, and some of my own personal experience, about being the person who's liable, responsible or accountable for something, particularly, I guess, as sort of pertinent, and I guess it's a concern for people potentially to be the person who's signing off for HRB. So how do you feel about that, and who takes that role, I guess, within a project, and then for the future after it?
Well, there's no option as to who takes it. It's the company or person who owns or is responsible for the envelope and the common parts of the building. They have to be the principal responsible person, like the principal accountable person. It's not optional, and they cannot delegate that role. If you are that person, you're responsible for that, or your company is responsible for that. There's no getting away from it.
Okay. So how are insurers and lenders interpreting and reacting to these new responsibilities? Have you seen increases in insurance premiums or indemnities around this?
Yes, 100%. There's the insurer, from a PI perspective, the PI tends to go up around 15 to 20% because of an HRB. Funders and lenders are having to educate themselves on the funding structure and change where and how funding is released, because it's not the expected and usual method of doing it. So it's educating all parties, including the insurers and the funders. But the insurers, as I said, are charging a lot more because of it. There's no way around that.
Sure. Have you noticed that, Pritesh?
We're finding the same when we do our annual get our quote. We've got to say we are working on HRBs, so our premium's gone up by 10%. Talking from a developer's, developers, they're having to, like, in terms of finance cost, a project that could be 24 months could be 36 months, so that's an extra 12 months worth of finance which they've got to account for. So it has a massive impact on cost on the project.
Yeah, but sorry. It also comes back to this peak. If someone's funding it, educating the funders that a lot of that money has to come up front, long before it even gets to site. They need to be releasing funds to allow that front-loaded element of work to happen. And if the funding is coming from there, they need to be educated that the funding has to change its whole sort of pressure point, if you like.
Sure. And so with the legislation that's currently out there, if there was something you could add or amend or remove, is there anything that's really sticking point, or something that you think could be added in to make it easier at all?
I think a bit more clarity. I think the fact that no one really knows how it's being run or what to do, what the process is. But I mean, for an architect to put in a scheme and the planners not to know that you have to submit for Gateway 2 is just already a fundamental error. There's an issue there with the system. So I think understanding what you need to do to achieve Gateway 2 and having a bit of clarity there, like a team or some sort of body to understand that this is what we need to do to achieve Gateway 2 would help the system,
I think there needs to be a different filter put onto the application, so that it's not, at the moment, if you tick one box, then you go into the bundle with everybody, whether you're an apartment, changing a few sockets and moving a wall, or you're a new high-rise building. It's all put into one big bundle together. And there needs to be some sort of filter where it's staged. And if you are only moving one wall, you go into a different channel and you get fast-tracked because it's such a simple little application that they should be able to look at that and go, this is very simple. This can get in and out in days rather than being involved for 9 months in an application for replacing a kitchen, for example. So that filter needs to be altered, but at the moment there's no scope or intent to do that, but it needs to happen.
Okay, interesting. Any thoughts, Pritesh? So how do you balance commercial pressures with the legal duty to meet higher safety standards? So I guess this is where we're saying there's increased costs, there's time scale. How do you try and, obviously you want to get it done at the best price you can. How do you kind of approach that? Because obviously just trying to balance the legal versus making money ultimately.
I mean, with clients, we always, or the cost consultant, we'd always, they want to have an idea of what it's going to cost. But now I think what we're finding is that we're pushing back now. It says like, you need to have that correct information and get that information costed, because if you don't do it, it's no longer a case of just build it and we'll sort it out later. You can't do that now, because if you don't have the permission from Gateway 2 or the correct information, you could build something and it's non-compliant, and the whole project at the end of it, you're just going to get a non-compliance certificate. So you won't get the HRB, you won't get Gateway 3 permission. So the whole project is.
Knock it down, start again.
Yeah.
Who checks it? So like you mentioned about someone's building something and they don't, is it building control officer responsibility to check that the HRB has been done? I mean, how does anyone know? Where does it get logged? And how would someone flag it if you built it without having the submission?
Well, this comes to the golden thread. You have to, as a contractor, or as a whole team, but the contractor, once it's on site, has to record, and it has to be data tagged and position tagged. Every single element of that building has to be recorded as you build. Every detail, every junction, every pipe penetration, everything has to be recorded and has to be put into a document. That document is part of what forms your Gateway 3 submission. If there's anything missing from that application or from that bundle of information, then the golden thread is broken and you won't get your Gateway 3 approval, and that building won't be able to be inhabited. And I think that's where I've heard of a few cases where contractors have started on site and been charging on and had no idea that they've had to keep this record, and got halfway through and realized that they retrospectively have to go back and start opening up. No, they have to open up and they have to rip ceilings down and they have to then take photographic records. And if it's not, there's the specific software that you have to take the photographs on that makes sure it's data, time, and location tagged, so there's no cheating. All of these things it's on the onus of the contractor in this instance, but before that it's the rest of the team. If any of these stages are broken, then you won't get your Gateway 3. So it is the responsibility of the whole team to maintain that golden thread. And it's not just. Everyone thinks once you've got your Gateway 3 and the building's complete, you hand it to the client, it's all over. It's not. That continues until the point the building is demolished in the future. 100 years' time, that golden thread has got to continue all the way through the life of that building.
Right, okay. Yeah. Yes.
Does it become the responsibility of the panel?
Yes,
So
it does.
You hand over the information and you can walk away.
Yeah, we can, but yes, it does. Then it shifts, but that golden thread needs to continue all the way until the point the building is demolished.
So we come to the end of the questions. Is there anything else either of you would like to add, and then we'll throw it out? I'm sure maybe there's some very pertinent questions out there. We'll see if you've been paying attention. Anything else that sticks in your mind that you think would be worth sharing?
I mean, following on what you said before, I think ultimately, it sounds like a hassle now, but I think ultimately it will lead for better process and better professionalism in construction, especially from a contractor's point of view. I feel it would ensure that it's not like design and build, get on site and just do whatever, and there'll be better record keeping. There'll be, like when you're starting on site, when you're starting a project, it hopefully should help the industry become much more professional for SMEs. You know, bigger tier one contractors, yeah, great, they're already doing it. But if they can pass a lot of that systems and processes down to like smaller contractors, that will definitely help the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you, Stuart, you mentioned to me earlier on, I think you sort of put a nod to it earlier on, but around this, it's flipping the mindset from being negative to a positive, right? Which is positive intent.
That's just what I was going to say, yeah. This isn't going away. It's here to stay. So there's no point crying about it or seeing it as a hurdle. We have to embrace it, we have to make the most of it, and we have to just work towards making it the most positive change we can in the industry. We have to, otherwise we're just going to be hitting our heads against the wall.
So has anyone in the brewery?
I've never got involved with HRB building, but I'm interested to understand from your experience, Stuart, like who drives the process, who sets the structure at the start for the HRB application, and also does it kind of change your approach to how you procure your project in terms of competitive and negotiated tenders? Because I imagine it leads to a negotiated kind of process if the contract has to be involved kind of right from the start.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's fundamentally changed the way we procure a project now, because and a lot of the time the clients will have a number of preferred contractors they'd like to work with anyway. So we always open it to the client first. So who have you worked with? Who would you like to work with? If they have no idea, we'll bring some people to the table. But yes, the contractor now is being brought on board at the same point. The structural engineer, the PM, the QS, everyone gets involved. The contractor is brought on board at exactly the same time as part of the professional team. He's no longer someone we go to at the end of the stage 4, and the whole structure of procurement is changing entirely because he's brought on board as a professional, and the pricing and procurement only happens at the stage the Gateway 2 submission goes in. So it comes down to the QSs a lot more now to have the project budget is much more based on the QS's word rather than getting any pricing later down the line, because it has to be that way. And in terms of who drives it, at the moment, I mean, you're all a team together. We have the health and safety chaps who are brought on board to help us with it, but effectively we have to, as architects, control the whole sort of checklists and everything, and make sure that everything has been done in accordance with what needs to be bundled together and submitted. But we have people who we rely on to also help just flag if we're missing anything or not. But there's a list of thousands of check boxes that we have to go through to make sure we get it right.
Would it like a CDM consultant or something like that be instrumental in? Yeah. Okay. That's the whole thing. Okay.
I was just going to say, in your experience, how long is it taking to get through the various statements? It's 3 days, but in terms of time scale, what do you see Gateway 1 to Gateway 3?
At the moment, we haven't reached a Gateway 3 yet. I don't know how many people who have, but our Gateway 2, we've got 2 at the moment, and predicted to be around about 6 to 8 months. Yeah. But it is sliding down. I mean, there was one, the last one, we weren't involved, but the PM on the project, his was 14 months. And that was an actual 14 months. That's how long it took them to get their first reply back on the Gateway 2. But they're now predicting 6 to 8, and they're hoping to keep, because they have employed a lot more staff, but we're waiting to see how much impact that's going to have. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It unfortunately is causing problems in the industry. When people realize that there's going to be an issue, they often just decide to walk away, or not. If they get involved, they're looking to purchase a building. As soon as they find out that's potentially an issue, they might just walk away from the purchase altogether.
Andy?
So we've been involved for 6 months. Obviously, the client before that had submitted the project for planning, so they're already in it for most probably close to 12 months already. Right.
Do you mean you're doing building work?
No, just the design, yeah.
So you'll sit in your office while this is going on?
Yeah. So essentially, we could, if he got planning tomorrow, we could be on site, but with HRB you can't. And
So did they apply, when they applied for the planning, did they apply to start the HRB process as well?
No.
No. So then that started sort of 6 months later. So
Yeah.
you still can't do anything. You can't do anything really until you get that first sign-off.
Not the first. Gateway 1 is, sorry. Gateway 1 is fairly straightforward. You're just submitting saying this is an HRB. We're going to be making a submission. You get sort of registered that this is going to be coming. But you can't do any work until you've done your Gateway 2 submission and you've had consent for the Gateway 2 submission. So that's the end of stage 4. We have to, the full building has to be fully coordinated and designed, then submitted, and then you wait 6 to 8 months, then you get approval, then you can start on site. So that
Once you make the submission, there's no guarantee that you're gonna.
It's going to be accepted.
Yeah. So you could fail, and then do they even tell you why you failed, or I think yeah. Okay, so.
So you know with some plannings you can do a pre-submission. Can you do a pre-submission with so you can't get a steer on whether? Okay. Which is, Stuart, you said there are some companies that can support with some of that through AI potentially to be able to give you an idea if it looks like it's going to be, but I guess it's no guarantee of success, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Felix.
Have you managed opening up works and things for investigative works? Do you have to inform them of doing investigative works?
Yes.
That will obviously that will enable your stage 3 and stage 4.
You can apply to do sort of soft strip works to do enabling and to do exploratories and investigations, but you cannot jeopardize the fire integrity of the building. So you can't pull down ceilings, you can't get rid of fire detection systems. You've got to maintain the integrity, particularly if you're doing an apartment in a live residential building with people living in the other floors. That the building has to stay, the apartment has to stay integrally safe through the whole process. So if you do an opening up of a ceiling, you have to then close it on the same day and then record that, report it, which you can do as under emergency works. There is an emergency process where you make a submission the same day you do the opening up and then you record it and submit it. But it does make it much more complicated. You can't just strip it back bare and then go, right, what have we got in here? Let's have a look at what we've got. You can't do that anymore.
So you have to inform them before you do it. What's the process there?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You tend to do it as an emergency. Yeah, emergency works, where you say that there's a risk to the building, we have to do this, and then you rip a ceiling down because it was failing, and then you have a look quickly, and then you put the ceiling back. You've got to be quite clever with the way you do it, but it comes under emergency works, and you can do that sort of immediately because that has to be deemed as maintaining the building's integrity through emergency repairs.
But
Then you have to submit that as a, yes, you do.
just do some opening up works, close up the ceiling, and then
No, you can't do that.
Babak?
Is there an easy way to tell whether the building is HRB or not? Like, is it maybe a certain year, the building?
There's nothing to do with the year. It's the height, and if it's a single residence, the height is irrelevant. Oh no, the height isn't irrelevant. There's
18 meters.
No. If it's single dwelling, it's 7 stories.
If it's an individual house,
It doesn't. No, yeah, you're right. Single dwelling doesn't.
there's a list online.
Yeah.
Because just put in the postcodes, and it tells you.
It's, yeah. But the main criteria is 18 meters and multiple residences in the building or multiple occupancies in the building. Yeah.
but don't you have to? People have to actually register the building, otherwise it's
They're legally required to do so.
yeah. If they're yeah. Okay.
But if they don't know, then they might not be registered yet.
They frequently don't know.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Yes.
this is it. Yeah.
Ignorance is bliss.
Is it specified what type of materials should be used for new builds? Because this will mostly apply to new builds. Now, existing ones should be adapted only, or what do they do with the old buildings?
You have to. If you're going to change an old building, you have to adapt it to meet the new regs now. So that's a massive cost to any, like you're saying, like.
Specified materials, because in my opinion, everything comes down to the concrete strength, the side as well, and then the fire safety and probably the efficiency, the thermal efficiency as well. What else could be involved into high-risk building? Now, it needs to comply with the new safety, basically.
Yeah.
Which is mainly fire.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if it's a listed building, sorry, if it's a listed building, it's not the thermal efficiency that's a concern at that point. You're obliged to make it as improve it as much as you can, but you have to comply with the fire regulation. So you have to reboard the ceilings or insulate or do whatever you have to do to make sure there's no getting around the fire regulation. That trumps everything. But the thermal efficiency, you do the best you can in an old building.
There's also like a new, I don't know if you're working with the fire consultants.
Yes.
So there's a specialist person now who comes on board to advise on those details and to.
Okay, because I know a company that rents about 2,000 properties in London, and now what they have to do is just it's to comply with new rules. They're going to have to adjust or change all the front doors of the apartments and everything. It's not compliant with fire safety in terms of cupboards on the communals. So basically, they're going to have to review the whole buildings that they own and to make all these adjustments. I think everything started a year ago or so, now in a process, and they want to start as soon as possible, and there is a quite shortage in that labor to be provided as well, because you need this a license, so you can give the client the certificate that all the work has been done safely and everything you've changed complies with the new rules.
Yeah.
If the building at the moment, I'm not 100% sure, but if you have a building which is essentially HRB, if you don't do nothing to it, you don't have to upgrade the building. If you add or change the building, then you have to.
They have to.
Yeah. Okay.
My wife is property manager within the company, so she's working now to find contractors to do all these works because they have to comply with the new.
So that's because they've now deemed certain parts of that building like it's not compliant anymore based on the new HRB legislation, I guess.
It's not fire safety because, I don't know, they bought some buildings, I don't know, that have been built 40, 50 years ago, obviously, and they just have the same, probably, doors and so on. And yet, they have to adjust every single one to comply with the new fire safety.
I've seen this as well.
Yeah.
They're redoing all the front doors to all flats in these buildings, all the mansion blocks.
Yeah. And they don't do any other works with it. Only those ones will have to be adjusted so they can comply with the new.
It's to do with all the common parts, yes. So that the PAP, the principal accountable person, which is the company that runs, they have to manage the common parts, and they should be doing the externals if there's any external dangerous cladding. That also has to be done. But inside the apartments, don't have. If you're not making a change inside your apartment, you don't have to change anything. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, just the front doors, just the communal areas and the front doors.
Okay, interesting.
And then that's what I'm saying, in terms of any new projects, are they clearly specified what type of concrete, what type of, I don't know, and all the items, are they listed? So for example, the main contractor will be able to contract all from the suppliers the right items so he can start the work? Or they just like in a broad?
No, it's just a broad. It has to comply, but there's so many products out there.
You don't know how to comply or what to comply with?
Yeah.
Well, there'll be a set rating, so it'll be about to do with spread of flame. So any material that has a specific spread of flame, the doors will have to be a certain fire rating, but you can get your door from 1,000 different suppliers as long as it meets that rating. So it's all about the rating, not the supplier. So
Actually, no, as the principal contractor, you have to, in your competency declaration to the BSR, demonstrate how you procure your items. So you have to show that your supply chain complies.
yes, absolutely.
And how would you know that? How would you know that? Like, so if they don't have a list on the government website saying these are, do they list very clearly what are the BSI, whatever standards you need to hit?
So
There are organisations that provide competency checks.
Right.
So we're doing a project at the moment which is for like a disabled building, and it's that. So the whole of the talking about doors, we're having a company coming, checking the installation of every single, the door frame and the doors. And we're having to create a data sheet that's been checked, signed off. So, there'll be processes like that. It might be the product, like every single project will have different details, different design. And that comes through collaboration of working together in terms of working out those details and making sure that you are compliant. But answering specifically that question, a project that we're working on is where the doors are the actual frames, the actual door. As the installation goes in, it's been checked by a specialist person and then signed off.
So the specialist person will know the HRB legislation to know that it's fire safe.
Yeah, so it's because it's.
And did they recommend those doors, or did you go and find them and then you asked them whether they're right?
We procured it with the client and the design team. We we found a supplier that can actually do the work, supply the doors, come and offer somebody to actually sign off that these doors are compliant, they've been checked, and then signed off on a register, and then this is given to the client at the end of the project.
Okay, makes sense. Yep. Sorry, Richard.
Would you say that the use of BIM in your workflow, in the work that you're doing with HRBs, even if you're not working on HRBs, would you say that is kind of the direction of travel and it's kind of paramount and it can only really be done by using BIM?
I mean, from my perspective, yes, we've done it for years anyway, and I would say originally I would call it diet BIM, where we still collaborated just with the primary elements. So we always do our designs in 3D, and we would always bring in mainly the structural engineers package, and we'd overlap them, and we'd just do a sort of wander around the model in 3D and see if we'd make his model bright pink, and we'd just walk around and see if there was any beams sticking out, for example. We're now going much further and going into using software like Revista that does proper clash detection that you can highlight, and we also make sure that we get all of the services engineers information in 3D. So we do proper BIM now, where you are getting everyone, including the AV consultants, all of the racks, everything gets brought in 3D and collaborated into that central model, and then you do automated clash detection. I think anyone who's not doing that is crazy, because it just makes so much more. Yes, it's a bit more work up front, but it's so much easier to coordinate everything and have it all done up front. And you're not wasting money once you get to site, trying to work out how things are going to fit in. So we tend to not use the services consultants model. We tend to try and get the services, and they come back to you. We get the services contractor on board early to start to take the service consultants' designs and to generate them into a 3D model that we can start to incorporate as part of that stage 4 package. So as well as the contractor being brought on board early, we tend to try and get the services subcontractor on board early as well, get tendered as quickly as possible based on a set of criteria, and get his model generated at the same time, because that's probably the key coordination object other than our own work, to fit that whole mechanism inside of our building.
Do you find that a more efficient way of working? Is that
Yes, absolutely. It doesn't shrink the workflow, it just changes the intensity of when rather than solving problems on site, you're solving problems virtually before they become problems on site. It just changes the sort of intensity of when it happens. It's much easier to solve a virtual problem than a real problem once the duct doesn't fit.
So this comes back to the
front loading, absolutely, yes. Yeah. We're seeing a peak in the middle of stage 3 rather than at the end of stage 4. Yeah.
Stuart, just to follow up on that, how do you find BIM on sort of smaller projects where I can see that it's virtual on the larger projects, but on a smaller project, a small department, you find it, I guess you find that.
Just as useful, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's much quicker because it's a small apartment. You can do the coordination much quicker, but we do exactly the same process with a small apartment or a big block. We don't change that process at all.
Follow-on question. The main consultant team that you put together on that sort of apartment, on that sort of facility going into an apartment in a mansion block building, what are the components of the team that you put together in terms of third-party consultants?
Who's involved? Well, as I said, the team has grown. So you've got your standard structural engineers, your services, But there was also then the fire consultants. We have an HRB consultant, a health and safety consultant, project managers. There's everyone involved from the get-go. Rather than you used to traditionally have sort of 2 or 3 consultants just to do the whole basic concept in the beginning. But we just get the entire team on board early, even if there's some of the people aren't getting involved that much in the beginning. You get the entire team on board, because if they've got anything to add, they can add it early on rather than getting to further down the line. They go, well, you didn't think of that. We need to go back and start to revisit. It's better just to assemble the whole full team up front early.
Rory?
Like the final thought is, so like what Pritesh was saying, like having 90 or 95% of the design coordinated is a contractor's dream. I would absolutely love that. But then kind of just go back, just sort of for you, Pritesh, and particularly on that example you said with the specialists and the doors, like how do you manage the kind of the new elements of cost from a contractor perspective as part of that process? Do you know what I mean? So like, you know, how do you deal with that specialist door supplier cost on that specific example? You know,
I think that goes back to what Stuart's saying, what we were talking about earlier before everyone came, was that if we're involved, it's going to change the tender processing. I think a contractor has to be involved at stage 1, stage 2, or at the beginning of a project, because those kinds of details, you'd need a contractor on board to have the expertise. Yeah. Because they would have the knowledge of maybe previous projects they've worked on, and that could be factoring. Like a lot, say for example, plastering contractors that we work with, they now have specialist teams or within their departments that just deal with HRB details, and those details are then passed on to the architect. So, you know, it goes back to being in collaboration. Like, if you're working together and you've got the right team together, it just makes that whole HRB process should be a bit more seamless, but it's going to take time for people to understand this project that I'm talking about, where we had the doors. It was something that even the architect didn't know. It was just something that was flagged up by building control.
So was that then an added cost that wasn't built in at the beginning that then came along? That's the challenge, right?
It's a variation in the contract, but you know, so those kind of variations would hopefully, over time, people with the expertise and the knowledge would, you know, be less and less and less. But now it's going to be a big issue. But then having the contractor on board early doors, having a cost consultant, you know, the architect, and you know, you can try and have a budget at day 1, but that budget will obviously fluctuate depending upon those details and agreement upon those details.
Yeah, and I think just in general, an HRB building, just by the nature of doing it, you are going to be adding between 5 and 10% to the contract sum anyway, just by this additional process and by additional materials or upgraded materials that have to go in. You will be adding a cost, and you can't avoid that.
So every job goes for 11.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge amount, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
By the way, I did do that.
I think it's probably building scale dependent. I think the bigger the building, probably that might ramp down. Yeah.
How would you go about getting that? Because talking to different contractors around tendering against competitors, how would you go around approaching putting that information into a tender so that, although obviously you may well be coming in more expensive, but you can explain it in a way that, you know, people are going to find that compelling, or that they need to, because often people look at a number, right?
I think a project will start off with a cost consultant giving the client a budget, but I think from a contractor's point of view, I think what will happen is most probably is that your expertise and knowledge and having, because of HRB, a contractor might be rather be bought on board because of price, will be brought on board because of the knowledge and expertise they offer.
You will effectively become a consultant. You will be operating on a certain percentage. The contractor won't be going out and saying, well, it's not an overall price for the job. He's a professional who's brought on board at the early stage, and the price will come from the subcontractors later on after stage 4, once you're in gateway 2. The price for the project isn't coming out from the contract in the beginning before the contractor's brought on board. It's not how it's going to work, and it can't.
I mean, from a cost point of view as well, like a project that can start, if you're designing it now and you're costing it now in 12 months' time, is a different price.
So how do you manage that? That's quite tricky, right?
But I think that's being part of the process and being upfront with the client as well, saying that, you know, I think that's just an expectation that the cost will maybe go up by the time we do start on site, and that's the cost that will be at that point.
But a decent QA should be building that into his numbers.
Exactly. Any more questions? Are we all done? Okay, so thank you so much for the questions. Thank you to our wonderful panel, Pritesh and Stuart. It's been, I thought, very insightful. Lots to learn and to take in. Brilliant. Let's give them a round of applause.